Hello everyone, and welcome to the free and live Bootstrap webinar, where you're going to learn how to create a custom Joomla 3 template built on the Bootstrap framework. This webinar is sponsored and hosted by CloudAccess.net. My name is Ryan Bernstein. My friends call me Bernie. I'm going to be your moderator today, and at any point you can always reach out to us on Twitter at CloudAccess. You can email us directly, webinars@cloudaccess.net, or find us online at CloudAccess.net. More than willing to answer your questions about any of our free webinars and upcoming presentations. Your presenter today is Ryan Boog. He's the president of Happy Dog Web Productions. He is a specialist in front-end development, search engine optimization, and you can get a hold of Ryan on Twitter at Ryan Boog. Now, the Bootstrap framework features a 12-column responsive grid, dozens of components, JavaScript plugins, typography, form controls, and even a web-based customizer to make Bootstrap your own. And that's what Ryan's going to teach us how to do today. He is going to walk us through the entire process, and what's really interesting about his presentation is he's going to make all of the site files available to you, our attendees, today after the webinar. So Ryan is the president of Happy Dog Web Productions, and the Happy Dog team creates top-ranking sites that thrive within search engine results. Together, as a team, they build you a highly responsive web site platform, great for any device. And that website is optimized for top-of-page results. This orchestrated effort allows leads not only to fabulous-looking websites, but also to major leads and eventually profitable sales. So really excited to have Ryan with us today. And just to let you know, I am recording this webinar. It's going to be available later today on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/cloudaccess. I'll show you a little bit later how to access this webinar, how to access the site files for the template that Ryan's going to build, and also how to follow up with any additional questions. I do want to point you in the direction of your GoToMeeting slide-out question area right now. If you can find that little panel, you can type in a question, and Ryan wants to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. I'm going to help moderate those questions to him, but there are 253 people registered for today's webinar, so if we don't answer your questions, all apologies. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. Ryan said he'll sit here all day, but you know, we'll see about that. And you know, if you want to let us know where you're attending from, we'd really appreciate it. Ryan and I are actually both in the Midwest of the United States, but we know we have attendees from all over the world. A couple people have responded. Hi from Buenos Aires, Argentina, England, Florida, South Africa, Dubai, Washington, D.C., Romania, Italy, Pennsylvania. So, you know, find that GoToMeeting slide-out question area. Let us know where you're from: Boston, Netherlands, Oregon, Canada, Cyprus, California, and post us a question during the webinar. So I'm going to pass the presentation over to you, Ryan. Ryan, how are you today? I'm
doing well. Thank you. Thank you for passing it over to me in the lovely introduction.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It's interesting to see everybody from all over the world. It's my first time doing this, so hopefully I don't stumble too much for you guys. But thanks for the lovely introduction, and I just kind of want to give a side note and mention that we use CloudAccess, and CloudAccess is great for our clients, and it's a great hosting company that supports awesome, and we have dozens and dozens of clients with CloudAccess. And you know, props to you, Bernie, and the whole team over at CloudAccess for doing what you guys do.
Well, thanks. So you should be able to accept the presentation now, and I'll let you know when we can see your screen.
Okay, let me know when it's, I clicked the button, so let me know when it's up and going.
Yep, we've got you.
Okay, you got my the home screen for Happy Dog Web Productions?
Yep, that's correct.
Perfect. All right, I'll just give you a brief introduction of what we're going to be doing today. It's kind of going to be a fun webinar because I'm going to actually build a Joomla 3 template for you, but we're going to do it the right way and use Bootstrap the way it's intended to be, using its less files the way it's intended to be, and making it nice and easy for you to update your site in the future. And at the end, we can even take some hints from some of the people listening and adjust the site files accordingly. So it'll be kind of fun. Now keep in mind the first probably 45 minutes of this is actually going to be developing the template, and you're not going to be able to see the results, and it's going to be mostly coding. And that being said, if you've never coded a Joomla template before or never done anything like that, hopefully this doesn't bore you. Just stick with it. It's worth it in the end. How many of you guys have built a custom template before for Joomla? And I'll let Bernie kind of moderate the people answering that question.
Yeah, Sarah says, I have. Jip says, yes, a few. Teresa, working on one now. Pam.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, Pam, okay. Ruth, yes. A couple of folks have said never at all, though. So.
Okay. Well, if you've never done it at all, it's great that you're starting out learning about this cool new technology and doing things the right way. When I first started developing templates, it was so backwards, and there were so many different CSS files and IE only CSS files, and it got kind of crazy. So this is a simplified version, and you can do some really cool stuff with Bootstrap. If you've probably heard that Bootstrap is part of the Joomla framework now in Joomla 3, and you've seen some of its styling in the back end, and on the front end you can incorporate it in your site too. The way I'm showing you how to develop a template you can use for Joomla 2.5 or Joomla 3. Actually, technically 1.5 if you really want to, but that's outdated and I don't recommend 1.5 whatsoever. The Twitter Bootstrap is the website is twitter.github.io/bootstrap. I know it's a funny URL. When you get there, it'll look like this, and there's a button that says download Bootstrap. Well, it's kind of funny because you click on it and you really only get CSS files and image, which is like the icons that you get to work with, and just some JavaScript stuff. And that's not what we're dealing with today. So, but if you dig into this website here, you can kind of see what Bootstrap does with their typography, their code, their tables, their forms, the different styles of buttons they use, and on top of that, there's some really cool things they can do with Nav Bar, responsive Nav Bars, and one of its biggest advantages, though, over everything is its responsive scaffolding. You can use it on a mobile template or a mobile device or an iPad or a laptop or a desktop, and the website will scale accordingly. For example, our website here is built primitively on the Bootstrap environment, and you can see how the nav bar, everything kind of kicks down and resizes. So that's a good way to test if something's responsive. You can just scale the browser really quickly, and you can see if it's responsive or not. So without wasting any more time, we can dive in. Now, when you're going to create a template, you got to create a template environment. And so typically you find a folder, you create a folder. So what I'm going to do is create a folder, and I'm going to call it Cloud Vacuums. The reason I'm going to call it Cloud Vacuums is because our front-end designer was actually much better at this, and he's an unbelievable designer, and he develops a lot of our templates, and he developed this little template we're going to build called Mr. Cloud Vacuums. It's kind of a nod to CloudAccess, and I try to make it somewhat relatable to people that might be doing some type of a e-commerce or some kind of a site. So I kind of try to mix both of them in there. So this is going to be the template we're going to build, Mr. Cloud Vacuums. This is going to be a nice responsive nav bar up at the top with centered menu items with a Buy Now button on the right, so that's going to be pretty cool. So it's a simple design, but we don't have a lot of time, so that's just why I chose that. So we set up our folder called Cloud Vacuums, and we got to set up our template environment. Excuse me. So the first thing that I have to do is find the files that my designer made and copy them over. And he was nice enough to cut out all the images from Photoshop and get everything to me, so that's going to save us a lot of time for getting everything over. So what I'm going to do is copy over the images, which is in the images file, and really it's just one. It's just that cloud background, so that's kind of cool. And let's see what else he's got here. I've got a file here for his site info, and he kind of gave me some site information. This is the temp site that we were given to by CloudAccess that we're going to be working on. Our username and password for logging in, our font families, and then our colors that we're going to use in the template, the width of the site, and the height of the nav bar. Really simple stuff, really quick for him to do. So we've got that. We've got everything going. We've got our images in there, and that's a good place to start. he also was kind enough to provide a couple of other files, and they're called template preview and template thumbnail. Basically, when you're looking at the template in the back end of Joomla, you get to see these little files and see what the site kind of looks like when you're looking at the template, so that's kind of cool. Another nice thing that he did is created a favicon. A favicon is that little icon that shows up in the top left. So for example, if you can see my mouse pointer, you'll see that the dog for Happy Dog is our favicon up there. And what I'm going to do is, if you don't mind a second here, I'm just going to set our timer. I forgot to set my timer, so I just hope I don't ramble on too long here. Okay, so I'm going to hit start. Okay, back with you here. So now we've got our favicon, our thumbnails, and our previews, and our images, and that's all was given to us to save some time, and that's good. So the next thing that we want to do is create a file real quickly called component.php, and it just basically allows you to, excuse me here, I'll just show you what it looks like. It's just a really simple file, and it's basically used for when extensions want to show you like a pop-up window or something with no styling or anything in the background. I'm not going to go into this into great detail. It's a very simple code. It's just this, and you can copy and paste it from any templates that you have in your any existing template in the Joomla's templates. It's just a handy file for making things work nicely on your site. If you don't have it, sometimes things don't work the way they should or look the way they should. So I always try to copy that one over there as well. Now, after we do that, we are going to actually download Bootstrap and get to work, and we'll finish this template out on the fly. So let's go back to the Bootstrap website and go home, and I want to actually download the core files. And by doing this, I usually go to GitHub. There's a link here for the GitHub project. You can just Google Bootstrap GitHub, and this is the way I do it. I download the files just by clicking this download zip right here. There's an easier way or better way. Feel free to tell me, that's fine, but this is the way that I choose to do it. So now that we have it downloaded, I have it over here. I have two monitors, so I've got it in my other monitor over here. I will go and unzip it and copy some of the files over and show you what that looks like. So let me open up the cloud vacuums over here, and I'll extract these. And it takes just a second or two, and I'll show you what they look like. There's a Bootstrap master, and now you've got a little bit of extra stuff. You've got docs here, and docs actually are just examples of how you can use Bootstrap. It's kind of cool to look through, but the Bootstrap website also helps you with that too. But the most important thing here is this less file, or less folder. You look in here and you've just got gobs of less files. Now that's actually to your benefit. It's pretty cool in the way that works. So what I'm going to do is just copy those less files over here, and it takes, it's only 218K. It doesn't take that long. So now that we've got this less file over here, we need to let's work with the less files and actually. Oh, we got to copy one more thing over before I just caught myself. So thank goodness I did that. The Bootstrap master, there's that image folder. Remember, it has the icons that you can use. They're called glyph icons. It's a nice way to add stylings to buttons and things like that. So we want to make sure that we have that in there as well. So now that we got that, I'm going to open up an application called Crunch. Crunch is pretty sweet. You can find it at just you can Google Crunch app. If I remember right, it's crunchapp.net. We can put a link after this webinar's done. You still there, Ryan? You can hear everything okay?
Oh yeah, yep.
Okay, just making sure. I've been rambling for a little bit here. But yeah, as long as you can put a link to that Crunch app, I think it's a pretty good thing. It's free. It'll make you download Adobe AR, I believe, Adobe Air, something like that. But that's also free as well. So it's a great app for taking your less files and compiling them. Now what less is I'm going to open up the template here. So what less is basically pre-processing your CSS. You can add cool, basically makes writing your CSS very efficient and very effective, and you can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. So what I'm going to do is take this less folder, drag it over here, and you'll see all that stuff open up in less now. And less lets you look at all the different less files that are incorporated in the Bootstrap framework. And some of this may look familiar to you, some of this may not, but if you want to adjust how like the grids go or the carousel looks or the buttons, you can really dive in and go into the less files and manipulate Bootstrap the way that it's intended to be on a granular level. Now, the first thing I like to do when I go into the less files is to, well, first I'm going to just kind of give you a brief overview of what each of these are. And these are just different areas of Bootstrap and what it can do for you. The most important two files that are on here is bootstrap.less, which I'll open up right now, and then variables.less. Bootstrap.less, all it is just a bunch of imports. And what it is you're just importing what you want to be in your CSS. What kind of functionality do you want to take over from Bootstrap? So if you want your, and all this is pretty important until you get down to, maybe if you don't want sprites, you can take that out, or if you don't want, if you're not worried about pagination, and especially when you get to the miscellaneous section here, you can take out labels and progress bars and the accordion and carousel and hero unit if you're not going to use them. So we'll go over that later in a second. The variables are also really important. Variables are used throughout the Bootstrap. And so instead of typing in a hex number each and every time, you can just type in the variable for it. So that way, you can, if it does change on you for some reason, you can just change it once and it'll apply everywhere. That's a huge time saver to any of you who have written CSS before, and you want to, let's say you've got something with a certain hex number, or you've got certain font, like a heading you need to change, but it's got to change everywhere that heading is changed. Well, here you can change all your font sizes and families and colors and link colors and all that stuff all right here really easily, and it'll perfectly distribute it through your CSS files, which is super, super awesome. So that's the main power of Bootstrap besides its responsive framework that I think is great. So we're going to use that when we create this template. So now let's go and we'll actually work with the variables. Now that I got this open, why not, right? So let's dive in and see what we've got to work with. Now what I'm going to do, see if I can make this half a screen here. I'm normally used to working on two monitors, so you're going to have to work with me a little bit here because I'm on one monitor now. But what I'm going to do is pull up the information that our designer gave me over here and kind of fill in the information over here. So I'm going to go up to the top, and the first thing I see is, well, there's an open spot here for variables, and I'm going to type in one called max width. And right now he's got it set at 1,000 pixels, and I'm going to put the @ before it, which I should have done. And by typing this in there, if I want to, I can go like there, just to make it look nice. I can call this max width variable in the template, and then it'll be used. So now we've got a max width in there. Our serif font family is actually going to be Arial. I'm not a fan of these fonts. I just try to pick something really simple that a lot of people use. I like to go to certain resources and use some more customized fonts when I'm working on sites. But you know, to be honest, our designer's a heck of a lot better than I am, so he's really good at picking out fonts. So right now I'm pasting in the font families, and then underneath here you'll see Keeler colors. And Keeler is actually a pretty cool tool from Photoshop, and basically what our designer is able to do is take the blue from the background here and create all sorts of colors that are perfectly complementary to each other. So these are perfect colors that should be assigned to the site. So he was able to move things around and pick the right colors and do the right things. And so he did the hard work for us and actually picked out perfect complementary colors. So I'm going to quickly fill those in as well. And we'll type in the dark blue here. And we'll get the blue go here. Has anybody here used Keeler at all? Or heard of it?
Kyle's saying no. Sarah said she's heard of it. Paul says, yes, I did in developing a template. No, no. I have not. Yes. Mostly no's, though.
Yeah, it's a pretty unknown tool, but it's super effective and it's super cool. Bootstrap has its own core colors, but sometimes they might slightly clash or not go exactly with what you have. So it's nice to go in there and actually make it completely customized for this template. So now this template here is going to have buttons and everything that are perfectly customized and have just the right hex and tones to them to really match the site. You don't have to do this. I just think it's a pretty cool thing to do. The link color, you notice they've got their own link color here. Now what I'm going to do is, let's change it to blue. Why not? So I'm going to copy @blue, and all you have to do is go to @blue. Another cool thing about less is you can actually use commands like darken and lighten. So the link color on the hover, they're just going to darken the color by 15%. Now, that is super cool, especially anybody who's worked with CSS and you try to find a good hex number to match and try to find it manually. This is just, you can just use math and manually or automatically darken it and lighten it, which I think is super awesome. So we'll just keep going down. We make sure everything looks okay. The headings font family, I know on here we're going to want it to be the serif font family because that's just what's on the design there, serifs. And let's see, the headings color I know is that dark blue, just from looking at the Photoshop file. So I'm going to go blue dark. And this is, we're doing a lot of our CSS right now on the fly as I'm talking here, which I think is super cool. Going down even further, we've got some padding stuff we got in there and some font size, and you got your tables and buttons. And, this is another thing with buttons that Bootstrap has their own colors right here, and what we can do is apply our own colors. And you can see there's info, success, warning, danger, inverse. And what that means is if you go back to the Bootstrap site and we look at the base CSS and click on buttons, they each have their own color, which means they have their own purpose. Primary goes by the link color. Information goes by, if it's like informational, success has the green look, warning has the orange, danger has the red, inverse has the black. But now we've got our own keyword colors, which is kind of cool. So let's kind of change those around a little bit. Now we can, let's see, let's go to the, I'm going to copy some of these over here. Let's make sure I do this right. Blue, blue dark. Okay, so blue dark, something like that. Okay. So I'm going to go down here, and where's those buttons? I think I passed it up already. There they are. I'll go to info. Let's make that blue. And then there's even a command called spin, I think, which is kind of cool. And then that's for here. You can change it around. And these can be changed around really easily. Obviously, you can see that how easy it is to change your actual colors on here. And so success was green. Oop. And this is the part that takes a little bit slower here. So hope you don't mind me typing away here as I'm building this template and trying to talk about this at the same time. And green. And then warning was orange. The orange that's already in there. Danger was red. And then this is going to be pretty cool to see when we're done here. And you can probably see I've got some of the highlights being the lightened and some of them not. I'm honestly just whipping this together on the fly. You could, if I really wanted to, I could tweak this later to make it look and work the way I want it to. And inverse, whatever, we'll leave it at the darker color. That's fine. And I think everything else is good. So now we've got our fonts, our font sizes, our colors, and most of our generic variables in there, which I think is pretty sweet. And we cranked through that here in, like 4 or 5 minutes. That was pretty quick to get our CS or our less files all set up and get everything to go. But now we've got this actual template that we need to create. We got to create our template files. So now let's go back to the Bootstrap less and look at everything that's in there. And you'll see, I'm going to make this full screen now. You've got our variables, which we just did. Mixins, if you don't understand what mixins are, it's a great way to quickly write code. So for example, if you look down, let me see if I can find a border radius. That's probably the one that most people would be familiar with here. There's right there, border radius. So border radius, all you have to do is type in this mixin with this dot and enter your radius. And what this mixin will do is take it and spit out your actual border radius and print it out the way it should be. And you can use all these different mixins to, like for box shadow and transition. And you don't have to type in WebKit, Moz, O, transition. It'll just do it for you because that's what a mixin does for you. It eliminates a lot of the work for you. So that's what mixins are. That's pretty sweet. So we definitely want to keep those two. You want to keep the reset because that's just good styling. Is a good thing to have on there. The scaffolding, the grid, and the layouts are really important aspects to Bootstrap. It allows the things to be set up rightly in columns, and the grids and the layouts is a good thing to have. Our type, our code, our forms, and our tables, fine. Let's keep them in there. That's some of the power of Bootstrap. We'll even keep in sprites, drop-downs, wells. I don't think we need component animation. So if I ever want to delete something or not use it, all I have to do is just do that. 2 lines, it won't include it now. That way if I want to include it in the future, boom, there it is. For now I'm just going to take it out, close. I'm not even sure what that is, but we'll just leave it in there for now. We definitely want our buttons groups, our alerts, navs, nav bar, page, pagination, breadcrumbs, pager, all that stuff is good. Now modals, I'm going to take this out. And the reason I'm taking this out is because if those of you who are familiar with Joomla, sometimes you can throw a class of modal in an anchor tag, and that's supposed to pop up a modal box. And it used to work well with 2.5 and maybe even 1.5 if you call the modal class right. If you use this modal part of Bootstrap, it also has a class of modal on there that makes things absolutely positioned and tries to get it centered, and it really makes things wonky. And so for Joomla users especially, it's probably a good idea to take out this modals unless you really know what you're doing and you really want to use the Bootstrap modals properly. Otherwise, take it out. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. Tooltips, we don't really have any on this site. I'm just going to take it off. If I need it, I can just re-include it. Same with popovers. Popovers are actually really cool, but just don't need them right now. Thumbnails, I'm going to take those out because we're not going to use those thumbnails. What it is just a placeholder image if you want to put a placeholder image in there. With media, we're not going to need that. Labels, badges, for right now, let's not use it. I'm not going to have progress bars on this CloudAccess site. There's no accordion side menus or anything like that. And there's definitely not going to be a carousel rotating image. And the hero unit is just some big gaudy unit that's supposed to be like a call to action in the middle. And we got something that's close to that, but we're just going to do it custom. We're not including a hero unit. So now I've disabled all of this code and I've stripped out a lot of this. It'll eventually be a lot of this CSS. So we've stripped down our Bootstrap file, made it custom for the site, and we've made it actually pretty lightweight comparatively. So that's cool. Now this, you're wondering where are we going to put our template files and our CSS and how are we going to do things? What I like to do is create an extra line here in the Bootstrap file. We'll call it template files. And on this template files, we are going to, hold on here, put it up here. I'm just pulling something on my other screen, something popped up. I have to apologize for that. I'm going to import a file called template.less, and then we're going to want this to be responsive, right? You notice there's nothing on there for responsive framework or anything like that. But if you look over here, they do have a responsive less file. And I'll even open it to show you. It just pulls in responsive utilities and all the different responsive stuff on there. So it's, if you want it to be responsive, use the responsive less. It's just as simple as that. So what we're going to do is go add import responsive.less. I've got fat fingers sometimes, so you have to pardon my bad typing. I'm sure there's a lot of better typers out there than I am right now. So I'm also going to make a template-specific one. And it's nice to have because it's a lot of times on your template you want something special to happen when you're scaling up and down. So now I've got these two extra files on here. Responsive is already here, but we've got to create this template.less and template responsive.less. So I'm just going to quickly create them, and I'll call it seed file, save as, and I'll save it under my folder I set up, under Cloud Vacuums, less, I'll call it template.less. So now we've got that going for you. Now let's create another file, and we'll save that one as template-responsive.less. Cool. So now we've got both those folders in there. I don't know if they pull up. Yeah, see, they automatically show up down here too, which is nice. So we've got our template-less file. We've got our template-responsive file, which is nice. So in our template file, we're going to have like the HTML and the body and all the stuff on there. But this might be the point of the time where let's look at the file and actually code out the HTML of it, and then we can jump back into the less file and code the CSS properly. It's actually going to be pretty easy. Looking at this, I can see I've got a header, I've got a little banner area, a module to the left, the main content. I can even put a little module to the right here if I wanted to, which actually I'll do that for you guys. And that's basically it. I'll put a little footer at the bottom, and there we go. So it's going to be pretty simple to make. So let's go ahead and make that. I'm going to use a text editor I like to use called Sublime, and Sublime's pretty awesome. So I'm going to just start up a new one here, and we'll save this one as Cloud Vacuums, and we'll call it index.php. And because that's the name of the file that has to be in there. So we're going to write now the template file for what we're working on here. And all template files for Joomla, for the index.php, this is actually what runs your template and actually what shows what's out there. And so this is how you can get things to hide and show, is on this template file that you can adjust it in the back end. So the template file is called index.php. It's going to be in the root folder of everything. It always starts out with this. You got your PHP, just some simple code, and it says basically run this or die. Don't worry about that. Just plot that in there. Now there's a second little chunk of code, bits of chunk of code I'm going to put in there. And what this is some pretty cool functionality that I'll show you later, how you can actually apply special CSS to the body, and so you can target specific pages and item IDs and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. So we'll go back to that in a second. Now, to add Bootstrap, what we're going to do is add the Bootstrap in one extra line of code. And we'll see here, add style sheets, doc, the arrow, add style sheet, templates, whatever this template is, CSS, and then bootstraps.css. The reason it's called bootstrap.css is because we're going to be compiling this bootstrap.less file. And when we crunch it, or compile it or crunch it, whatever you want to call it, it'll turn itself into a bootstrap.css file. So that's pretty cool. So now going back to our index.php file here, we've got the bootstrap.css. This is an actual Joomla snippet of code here where you can include this right to left bootstrap and some bug fixes too. You can just throw in this little line of code. It's just a nice thing to have in there. It's not necessary whatsoever. And this is a good line to have in your templates at all times for this get users. Sometimes you can use this if you can see if the user's logged in or not. They can show a module. That's like it's a workaround way of doing it, obviously, without using something like Advanced Module Manager or something like that. So anyways, let's go in and let's make this template. It's going to be HTML5. So we're going to just give it the doc type of HTML. And I'm going to throw the simple heading in here, which is the HTML. You got, well, it looks like gobbledygook, but it's actually lets you know what language it is and what direction the text is going. Now, what I want to showcase to you right here is what I'm highlighting right here. It says meta name viewport, content equals width equals device width, initial scale equals 1. Now that might have confused some people crazily, and some people a light bulb might have went off. I'll explain it to you. What this is it's basically saying, let's check the viewport of what's looking at this website. then we'll make the width of it whatever the width of the device is. So if you're looking at it on your Android smartphone, it'll check out what the width is, and that's what the width of the website will be. And it's going to be set at 100%. It's not going to be zoomed out, not going to be zoomed in. So this is a big line of code making things responsive. If we take this out, the site won't be responsive. It'll just pull it up like a normal site. So this is actually pretty huge. This next line of code is just the normal Joomla stuff that it puts in there for MooTools and everything else. It's called the JDoc include type head. And then I like to throw this little line of code in there. If less than IE9, you can actually use this, pull up from the media JUI, an HTML5 shiv or shim. I've heard it being called both ways. And what that is basically IE8 and IE7 browsers that I do not like, and I've actually wrote a blog post about that. They don't consider HTML5 elements as valid. Pardon me, I had to take a drink. So things like header, footer, et cetera, there's certain HTML5 elements that it just doesn't view as valid. And there's other HTML5 elements that it just doesn't, it's not up to speed with. So this little snippet of JavaScript actually will detect if it's, if it's less than IE9, let's just make it work with HTML5. Because HTML5 is just the way to go, and it's the way to build websites now. So now the next thing I'd like to put in there is the body. And the body tag is somewhat beefy, but it's cool. You can see that site, the next part up here is container fluid, which is nice because I want to make a fluid responsive site. But you can see I have all this sorts of stuff in here for echo option. You can look at the view, the layout, the task, the item ID. So when you actually have the CSS spit out on your site, it'll actually say body, class, content, item ID, blah, blah, blah. So you can actually write CSS that is particular to your components, your item ID, your task. So when I saw this, I almost did a round of applause. I thought this was super cool. You could really get specific with some of your stylings, which I think is great. I also put an ID of top on there because I'm going to put a back to top button at the bottom. I'm just going to link it up to here. So that's the body. And next up, I'm going to put the header. And the header is the first thing I see on the site here. And it's just going to be this responsive nav bar. And I got the idea for this nav bar, and I modified it a little bit. So first I'm going to give a little shout out or a little props to Source Coast. They do some sweet Joomla extensions, and they do great Facebook integration, and we've used them. They're awesome. And this site was actually developed by a pretty high-end firm in Texas. I think it's Manos Crafted did this one. I want to say, I'm not 100% on that. But their nav bar up here, if you look, it's responsive, which is cool, and it's centered, and you got a call to action on the right. And I thought that was way cool. I thought that was wicked awesome. So great job, guys. I think this is cool, and hope you don't mind me stealing this for this little demo. I modified it a little bit, and hopefully you like what I've done with it too. So we're going to be using this style of a nav bar. Now going back to the index file that I'm working on here, I'm going to put that down here. And what I've done, I didn't paste nicely, but I'm kind of a neat freak about my code. But what I've done is taken the normal Bootstrap one and I've applied it to their special nav bar. So I've tweaked the Bootstrap nav bar just for this case. I just think it's a cool little Easter egg, a cool little nugget for maybe you guys that want to try something cool and different. So you'll have access to all this code at the end. I'm not going to explain everything since, again, we're limited on time. But basically, I'm throwing it in an element called nav. That's an HTML5 element. There's the button on the right. You get the cool site name that's going to be on there. It'll say menu for whatever this site's going to be called. And then we've got our navigation module right here, which is in the position of nav. And then we've got our header call to action, which is going to be that little button on the right. And you'll notice I have a class here called pull right. That's a Bootstrap class. And that basically is a float right class. It just says to float it to the right. And then the call to action is the custom one I put in there. But you'll see its functionality. It's pretty cool at the end here. So we've got our header, and now we're going to go down next. And before I go down next, I'm going to show you another thing here. I've got it fixed to the top. And I think these nav bars sometimes are kind of cool. They stay to the top. You never lose where you are on the page. So this is always going to be fixed to the top. Now, that being said, if it's going to be fixed to the top, sometimes I think the easiest way around it to place things properly underneath it, since it's fixed to the top, it doesn't technically have a width and a height. I create a div called a bump. And a bump is just a little div with a little padding on it, and it just gives it a little breathing room so the elements behind it don't sneak up underneath it. What I mean by that is this is fixed, and so if I didn't have a bump, this stuff would be moved up closer or almost underneath it. Like this vacuum would probably be underneath this a little bit. So I'm creating this little bump div, and I'm going to apply CSS to give it a little padding and bump it off from the top. I also added a Bootstrap class called Visible Desktop. What that means is this is only going to happen on the desktop. This bump's going to be active. If it's going to be on a device that's a width of an iPad or smaller, I think, what is it, 980 or something like that, this won't even register, because when that happens, the nav bar is not going to be fixed to the top anymore anyways. So that's why I did that. It's a quick, easy fix, and it's a nice little bump I put on there. Now, underneath that, if we look at our Photoshop file here, we've got a banner area, and that's just going to go right on the background, and it's just some text. It's really easy. So all I'm going to do there is throw in a simple module. It's just include modules and style, the name of banner. I don't want any styling on it because it's just going to be a simple banner on there. And the next, everything's going to be in a section. And the section is going to be this white part underneath here, where we've got this little curvy corner, and we've got everything in here. There's going to be a section in here, and there's going to be a footer down here as well. So we'll do a section on here, and we're going to actually give it a class of row fluid. Now what that does is, and what you want by doing that, is when you have things as row fluid, you can set spans within them. So for example, span 3, span 6, span 3, as long as they add up to span 12, that means you would have something that's a fourth of the width, a half of the width, and a fourth of the width. So that's usually a good way to do left module center for your content and a right module. And I'll actually do that on here as for you guys. So what I'm going to do is make it actually dynamic, so you don't have to worry about if something shows or isn't shown on a page, it doesn't fill up. So hopefully you're going to follow the logic I have in here. This didn't paste well either. So this is, I'm looking for the module left. If it's going to be there, let's pull this aside. I give it, it's called aside. It's another HTML5 element. It lets you easily view where you are on the page. So we got our section. If it's going to be left, we got aside with an ID of left. We got it span 3. And then we've got our module over there. Simple as that. Next, we got our main content. That's always going to be there. We don't need to surround that by our PHP if stuff. Hopefully I'm not losing too many people with all this gobbledygook code. And hopefully everybody's entertained so far. But we've got the main article, and that's actually an HTML5 element called article, ID of content, and then a class of PHP echo span. Now, that doesn't make sense because we don't even have span as a variable. So I'll go back and explain that in a second here. Let me put the rest of the right side in here. And back to here. This, I told you I'm a sucker for clean code. Again, we're restricted on time, so I'm not getting too nitpicky with it. So if this count module is right, it'll give it the ID of right, the module name of right. So basically what we're saying is if the left's showing, show the left. If the right's showing, show the right. Either way, this content should be here, and the span should show regardless of what's showing, if the left is showing and the right's showing. So now we have to basically dynamically say, what is this span variable and how is it going to be affected? Well, for that, we're just going to scoot back up to all the stuff before this doc type here. And we're going to adjust the content width on the fly and close out our PHP tag because I just noticed we don't have that closed out. So adjusting the content width because we're still within the initial PHP tag up here. So we're writing it like this. If this module's left and the module's right, the span's going to be 6. That makes sense. The center stuff's going to be 6. You're going to have 3 on each side. If it's on the left and it's not on the right, And the reason it's not on the right is because this exclamation point is going to be 9. Obviously, it's going to be 3 on the left, 9 on the right, and vice versa. We got the exclamation point here, not on the right, or not on the left and on the right. It's also going to be span 9. Else, you can give it a span of whatever you want. You can call it span 12. You can call it full. Either way, if there's no modules showing at all, this is what's going to show. So now we've got it dynamically set up where we've got our section, our left module, our main center module, and our right side module. And we're just about done with this template, but we have to do the footer still, right? So we'll just quickly put in the footer, and we've got 2 sections here. Good thing I saw that. And the footer is just going to be a footer, a class of footer with a footer module. I'm going to put a little horizontal line with our back to top over here. We can click it, and it says the href is just the ID of top, which is what we put on the body. So that just shoots it back up to the top of the page. And this is a cool line of code I put underneath here. You do the copyright symbol, you put your site name on here, and PHP echo the date of the year. And what that means is you don't have to go in every year and change copyright 2013, copyright 2014. It just dynamically changes the year for you. So if you want this site to be live for quite some time, just leave this chunk of code in here and you're good to go. Now we're almost done, and you might be wondering, well, how come there's no JavaScript in there? You know, there's no Bootstrap JavaScript, so how is it even going to work? Good question. And there's 2 ways to put it in there. And I always put it at the bottom because then it loads faster and it loads last. So you can kind of load up the site first, then Bootstrap JavaScript. So one way is to add this snippet of code. This is a Joomla-specific line of code, and it just adds the core Bootstrap framework. The other option would be to add something actually specific to your template, like this. I commented it out, but echo this URL, templates, your template, make a JavaScript folder, and use the actual latest and greatest Bootstrap minified JavaScript file. Now, there's pros and cons to both, and I'm not going to get into why you should choose one over the other. There's obviously, if you use the latest and greatest, then you're good to go. But if you let it go for a while and you update the Joomla might have a more recent version. So I'm just going to keep it simple and keep it within the Joomla framework, and their JavaScript for Bootstrap seems to work just fine. So now we've got our section, now we've got our footer. Now let's just close out our template just by closing out the body and the HTML, and that's it. We're done. We created our template file. We wrote everything for this page. So we've written the CSS almost and the template file for our new template here in about 20 minutes. So we're on a good pace so far. So next up, let's go back to the template files and actually write the CSS quick for what we need on here. Because if you notice, we're going to have this cool background, and we're going to have some rounded corners here, and we want the background to be dynamic and cover the screen at all times. So let's open up the crunch file, and we'll open up our template less file, and we'll just put some structure in there. And what I'm going to do is show you the first line of code, which is HTML file. And what I'm doing is I'm actually applying that background image to it. And I don't know why I have a hex number in there. That should be the blue. I think that's the blue that we used. And you'll notice underneath here I have within here dot cover. Now dot cover is a mix-in because it's got the dot behind it, right? But I don't see a dot cover in here anywhere. In fact, if I searched all around, I wouldn't find it, right? So what I'm going to do is actually write a mix-in for it. And what it is makes it where I can, it's a CSS3 way of making a background cover an entire page no matter what size it is. So that's how easy it is to write a mix-in. And now let's keep going on our template less file. The next up, we've got our body. And the body's going to be pretty simple to do because it's, all it is we've got our max width set to whatever our max width is in our variables, which is this. The margin is 0 auto, which means it centers it. And I put background none because I think Bootstrap applies a white background to it, so we're just going to take none off it. Actually, I think you can change that in the variables, but I'm just going to make it none for now. Now, if we look at our template file, the next thing up underneath is the header. I'm just going to do the header last. So what I'm going to do is create that bump. And that bump, and actually that I'm going to make the section be the same thing. So the bump in the section, I put margin top of the nav bar height times 1.2. Now the reason I put this in there is because A, to show you that you can use math and less, which is awesome. So I'll calculate the nav bar height, just make it a little bit more than that, and that bump is going to make the banner go down just a little bit below where the nav bar is, no matter what the nav bar height is. And that's cool. And the section will just be according, it'll be the same, and it's going to be dynamic. Now, we've got one more thing, and I'm just going to apply a class to it. If we look at our Photoshop file, we've got this vacuum here. We notice it's floating above, and it's not staying in this box. So how are we going to bump it up? Well, an easy way is just to apply a CSS class to it and make the margin up a little bit. So I'm going to make a class called leftModUp, and what that is it'll just bump it up negative the nav bar height times 1.6, which means it's also going to be dynamic for the nav bar height, but it's going to move it up accordingly and move it up so it's going to be right in line with this, maybe a little bit above it. It's a cool way to do it. So the next chunk of code I'm going to put in here, I'm just going to paste it all in here, and I like to put this in here, is all I'm doing is taking the colors and making a CSS class for them. So if I want to make some text dark blue or blue, I can just give it a class of blue. If I want to take a box and make it red, then we'll make it red. Just give it a class of red. It's just a really easy way to make your CSS work with your less files, and it's a great thing to have. Now, I'll do the header part last. I'll just jump down to the content. In the section here, we have the bordered radius. So let's just throw in that mix in for the bordered radius. And so all it is literally is one line of code. And let's make the section and the footer both white, because you notice that they're both white. So section and the footer both white. That's nice. And we notice I remember we saw padding large, padding small. Where was it? Well, it's in here somewhere. But there's something in here for padding large, and padding small. It actually gives, I don't know why I'm not finding it right now, but you can set what the padding actually is in your variables. And we don't want the text and the pictures and everything going right up to the edge, because it just doesn't look good. So we're going to give it some padding. So we're going to give some padding to the article in the footer, and we're going to give it padding large. Now, I don't want the aside on the lefts or the rights to have that much padding, because they're just side information. So I'm just going to give that padding small, and that's fine. And that's it. That's literally all I have to do for the template file besides this cool nav bar menu. Now, this nav bar menu it's got some pretty crazy less stuff going on in it. And so we don't have time for me to dive in and get that going here. So all I'm going to do is go in here, paste it in, and just quickly say it's the nav bar. We've got our font size, the background text align, the height, the max width. And a lot of this stuff is just for making the centering. I have comments on stuff here, so when you get the files, you can see what I've done. You can also see here that I've nested files. So I've nested CSS. You notice this isn't closed out before I started this. And that's another cool thing about Lest. You can nest CSS selectors. So it'll actually spit out as nav space .nav main. Then this will spit out as nav space .nav main space ul.nav. So that's a really cool aspect about Lest, that you can nest things. So you don't have to rewrite things over and over and over. But that's everything for the template files. We got our only thing left now is just this responsive one. And this responsive one is pretty much nothing. It's just some cookie cutter stuff I throw on there, and there's actually nothing in there except for some stuff for making the responsive nav bar work nicely on mobile phones. So now that we've got all that really, really fun coding out of the way, let's do the fun part and crunch this. So what I'm going to do is click Crunch File, and it's going to tell me I have a syntax error naturally on line 63. On here, import. Okay, Oh, I didn't put quotes on any of this stuff. Ha! Nice. So this shows you. Pay attention to what you're doing. Sorry about that, guys. I normally don't do stuff like that. I'm telling you. But then again, Mike's the guy that does all this stuff, and he's a lot better than I am.
Yeah, you know, Ryan, Paul posted something in there. You don't have to use quotes for importing. It kind of caught your error a while back.
Yep. Okay, well, thanks, Paul. It's you know, nobody's perfect, and I'm definitely not the best guy here at this. So we'll go back to this Cloud Vacuums. I'm just going to create a folder for CSS, and within the CSS folder, I'll save it here. And it says bootstrap.css. So that's cool. We've got our CSS file. We've got our index file. We've got almost everything we need for this whole template to get going. Now, one of the last files we need is called, it's like template details, and that's actually a very important, it's a very important, I'm going to see if I can memorize this one here. Boom, perfect. I got two screens here, so I'm going to pull up one over here, yank it over here. That's why I like Sublime. I'm going to save this one as template details.xml. And what this is it when you're installing it and when you're setting up your template, it lets Joomla know what's going to be in your template. So in your template details file, you're going to have your basic first line of code. Your first first 3 lines of code are going to be standard for Joomla 3 sites. And Joomla 2.5 sites, I think the only difference is you change that to 2.5. I could be wrong on that. It's been a little while since I dove into the guts of the template details XML files, but that's what it is. Now, I'm pretty sure in 2.5 and in version 3, it's going to be extension, and everything's going to be wrapped in this extension. Now, for time's sakes, I'm just going to copy the first chunk down on here, and just it's the name, the version. You can put the date, make it today, 7/10. Me, my email, our company. You can put in any description you want. I'll add something here. Woo-hoo. So let's have fun with it today, right? Now the next chunk of files, or next chunk of things you need in your template details file is what files are you going to include? We've got our component file, our favicon, our index, this file, and our 2 template previews that are designer made. We have our CSS folder. We don't need the HTML folder yet. Actually, I'm just not going to include it for time's sake. We got our images and then the image folder. And that should be it for the files, which is nice. We have our positions next, and then that's going to be it. Now, when creating a template, you can really get nuts with it and create options and create things you can pick on your template to change things. And I'm not getting into that today. I'm just getting into creating a basic template that you can use with Bootstrap Less, and it's mostly just to show you the power of Less. But notice over here I have positions, and then position here I have nav. And if I look over here, my first thing I have here is nav. Okay, that matches. Then header CTA, header CTA. You want to make sure that your positions match what you have on your template file. So you notice I have banner right here. The next one is left. Then there's one for above the content and below the content. There's one for the right, one for the footer. So these match. These are all good, and that's it. This is the template details file. I'm going to save it, and we're all good to go. So now all I've got to do is zip it up and install it, and then we can play with it a little bit here. We've still got 10 minutes for me to showcase a couple things that Less can do in the power of Less. So I'm going to minimize this, open up my little folder that I have for Cloud Vacuums, and if you want to include these Less files, we can put that in the template details. Hey, why not? Let's do that real quick. So I'm just going to add this folder in there as well, and I'll call it Less. That way, when you get the template file, you have the actual source Less files as well. So now we'll click everything, and this is everything that we need. CSS images, images Less. These are all the files that we want. So I'm just going to click Send to Compressed Zip Folder, and I'll come up with a cool name for it, and I'll call it CloudAccess Rocks.zip. Of course, I have a capital L there. Perfect. So So now I'm going to open up this Happy Dog Webinar.CloudAccess.net site that they so graciously let me play with here and get set up. And we're going to install this template we just made. And we'll see how I made the template in 40 minutes and use Bootstrap framework. Of course, it's got, I've got to pull up my site info file here and see what the user and the password was. Actually, I'll just paste in the auto login that Bernie so graciously gave me here. So we've got this in there now, and we'll go to Extension Manager, choose File, and I'll go to where I have this file sitting on my computer, Cloud Vacuums, Cloud Access Rocks zip file. Upload, install it, and then it'll say installing template was successful. Cloud vacuuming, of course, woohoo. So we've got our new template in there, and we've got our image in there. Things should be pretty close. Now we just got to assign some modules, get some content in there, and we should be good to go. So I went to Extensions, Templates, and we'll see right now Protostar is the default. We've got this new one on here called Cloud Access. We'll make that the default. Now let's hope and pray this loads up. Oh, it does. Now you'll see that we've got our site. Oh, and I actually created this module beforehand. You have to apologize. I'll open that back up for you. We've got our Nav Bar, and we've got our Buy Now button, and it's responsive, which is cool. Your site hosted with CloudAccess.net, that's in there. And it's all adjusted accordingly. So we've just created a template using the LESS framework, using the core Bootstrap LESS files properly, and it was actually fairly simple. And I did it in probably 45 minutes or here or there while talking to you guys. So that's pretty cool. But let's dive in a little bit further and see how easy is it to make some modifications and really change things drastically. Now, I see that our designer just came in and he said to me that, you know, the new look for responsive isn't this narrow. Let's go big. Let's do 1,400 pixels as the max width because we've got a 1,600 pixel monitor. Most people do. Let's make it big. Okay, that makes sense. And if you look at the design, you know, this isn't, you got to make the nav bar height bigger than that. That should have been like 100 pixels. Okay, I agree. Let's do that too. That's easy. Let's open up the LESS files. We'll go to variables, the max width. We'll just change it to 1,400 pixels. And we'll find that nav bar height, which is down here somewhere. There it is. It's set to 40 pixels right now. Let's make it 100. That's it. And we'll go to here, crunch the file, and then I'll open up my FTP in my other window so you're not going to see that. And I'll pull up this, and I'm just basically going to overwrite the CSS file that's in the folder. So I go to my Cloud Access CSS folder and overwrite with the Bootstrap file that we just created. And now that I've done that, I'll go back to here and click on here, and you notice that's how simple it was. We bumped everything down. This bumped down accordingly. We made this full width. We made the nav bar bigger. This adjusted accordingly. All this content adjusted accordingly. You didn't have to rewrite tons of code. I did it literally in a minute, maybe two. I don't know, but it's pretty simple. So it's really cool if you get the hang of it and you jump into LESS and you want to adjust things. That's great. Now, what I want to do real quick is show you how easy it is to make some more edits. I want to ask you what color should we make this call to action button, and what color should we make this link? Because if you look, it's kind of gaudy and ugly right now. And you can answer, Ryan, and I'll jump in and do that real quick.
All right, folks. Sarah says orange. Sarah was first to respond. Chris says red with a yellow link.
Red with the yellow link. Ooh. So ketchup and mustard, huh?
That's really a beautiful combination.
Why not? This is, you know, we're having fun with it, right? So let's go down here. We'll find the call to action, the .cta. The background, right now it's at black. We'll do it red. And then on hover, the background, we'll do both. So we'll hover it. This is going to be really ugly, by the way. So it's going to be red. When you hover over it, it's going to be orange. And the color will change from white to yellow. And that's it. So go here, crunch the file, and then go over to my FTP, upload it, and then we'll just refresh the website. We've got like 5 things going on here. So let's hit refresh. Look, it's orange with yellow, or red with yellow, and then you hover over it, and there's the orange. I didn't change the link cover color, but but this just shows you how easy it is to change some elements on there really quickly and really easily. For example, if we want to change the link color, we could go back here, and I think it's like one of the first ones up on here. Link color. Right now we have it at blue. Let's change it to red, and the hover color will darken automatically to it, which is nice. And again, it's just changing a file, crunching it, compiling it, uploading it, and then going to the actual site itself. And you'll notice these links are red now. And it's throughout the entire site, and the hovers are all done. So it just shows you that it's really easy to change, it's really easy to do, really easy to work with. And I'll show you the buttons real quick now that we have some time. See what article that is. I think that's just like a getting started article that you had on there. I am going to go to the actual Bootstrap file here, and I'm just going to copy this table and copy that and paste that into, where am I over here? Obviously you see I don't have like JCE or anything in there. But I'm going to put these buttons in there and show you what that looks like. The actual Bootstrap buttons that use all the... So you'll see the custom buttons that we did that are supposed to be used for the colors on the site, and I kind of switched some of the things around. But it's kind of cool. These aren't your traditional Bootstrap colors, but these colors are actually pretty complementary to the colors that are around it. They're pretty complementary to everything else on the site, and I think it's great. This template, you can also have a right side module. Things will adjust accordingly, have modules on the top and the bottom. But hopefully this webinar has helped you realize the power of Bootstrap, the power of less, how easy it is to modify your files once you get them up and running, and how cool it is, the different things you can do with Bootstrap and less on your site. Obviously, the most important thing that I think is having it be responsive, that this is all going to show up nicely on an iPad, and things adjust accordingly. I think that's super sweet. So hopefully that helped you guys. I stayed under an hour. I told Bernie that I'd take an hour to do all this. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer any kind of questions you have or comments, or if I was doing something wrong, that's fine. I'm not perfect, actually. The guy Mike here is awesome. So, but if you have any questions, fire away.
Oh, yeah, we got several came in during the webinar. A lot of nice compliments, too, for you, Ryan. That is great. Big time saver. No, I'm learning a lot from this webinar. Let's see. This webinar was very exciting for me. Thank you, from Christian. Lots of great stuff. Here, a question from Sarah, though, and this is going back to when you were removing items like the accordion and things. And she writes, does stripping out items from the less files make it run faster? What's the specific benefit of doing that?
Mostly it makes them a little bit more lightweight. If I was to add all these less files, like right now this less file is 133K. So actually, since it's so easy and quick to do, I'll just include all these, and I'll include some of them, and we'll see how much it changes them. It's not going to be much, but you're eliminating that much less CSS from there. And that makes a decent amount of difference on like 4G and 3G connections on mobile phones. And when you're designing on Bootstrap, a lot of times you got to keep mobile in mind. So when you're doing that, I'm just looking at the amount now. It's 154. So what I took out there was about 25K. That might mean 1/10 of a second, but it might mean half a second. Who knows? But when you're designing for mobile, you try to keep it as slim as possible. But it's just nice. It keeps your code nice and clean, and it's lightweight and it's perfectly customized for your site. But you see how easy it is to take things in and put them out anyways. So it's really not too hard. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Sarah says thank you with a smiley face, so I think we got an answer for her. Let's see, Kyle posted a question. Can you preview the code that's creating the site? Can you preview the code? I think we saw the entirety of the code. And
Can you the CSS code, you mean?
Perhaps.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, my version of Crunch, it just doesn't show it like nicely here. I'll pull it up of the actual file on here just so you can see it on Sublime. So we'll go to here, CSS, and let's open the Bootstrap CSS file, and I'll make this one. So you can see that it is the top line says CSS crunched or crunched with Crunch, and it's all minified CSS. And this little selector over here on the right is nice. Most of this is the Bootstrap code that we imported for responsive and things like that, and all the groups and forms and tables and icons. And then if you remember right, towards the very bottom was our actual file that we had on there. So we have the bump, the left mod up. So that's where all that stuff is. It's just it goes in according to how we import it. But this is what the CSS file kind of looks like after it's done. Hopefully, does that help?
Yeah, I think she kind of built on that. Can you edit it from the back end?
Well, you certainly can edit it from the back end, but it's not recommended. The reason why, that would just be a quick one-time fix, but the way less works is it compiles your less files. So if I edit the Bootstrap CSS file, and I go into here and I change some things, and then I crunch it, then it's going to overwrite that CSS file. You know what I mean? So it's not recommended. It's recommended if like you don't have access to the less files, and it's an emergency fix, and you make a note of it, you edit the CSS file first, then make sure you go in and edit the less file as well, because otherwise when you recrunch things, it's just going to be you're just going to overwrite what you did. So that's basically how that works.
Okay. All right. I like this question from Mike too. Can this work for custom Joomla admin templates?
Yeah, definitely. And I think creating admin templates is a great thing. The core one's good, but no, definitely. And a lot of extension developers use this as well. Create their own. They usually just use the whole Bootstrap in there, and they just leave it as all default colors. This was mostly for front end, as I showed you, because you can customize it per like a Photoshop file that's given to you. That's basically what the most of this was about for today. But yeah, you can definitely take the Bootstrap files, make it for your own admin template, and that's what they're actually on right now anyways. So definitely.
All right. And Paul posted a question, must we use the Crunch app, or can we achieve the same result in Text Wrangler for Macs?
I have not used Text Wrangler. I know there are some JavaScript functionalities that will actually compile your less files. You don't want to compile them on the fly. You don't want to do them in the browser, because that would just kill it. But I know on the actual Bootstrap site, I think, let me pull it up here. If you go to the home page, I believe there was something on here for customize. I thought there was something on here. Maybe there's not, but there was something on what's recommended for customizing or compiling less files. And I know that Crunch was one of them. And there was something else for, I don't know if it was CodeKit or something. I forget what it was. Maybe it's on here. But yeah, I've never worked with Text Wrangler. If it works for you, it works for you. I personally like Crunch. It's really slick, and it lets you know if you have an error or not, as you saw. And it's really easy to work with.
Hey, do you know if there's a module map for Bootstrap?
A module map?
Yeah.
Explain to me further what you mean by that.
Well, layout of module positions.
Oh, it's more or less it's a grid. So I think it'll show you on the actual Bootstrap file, or Bootstrap site. If you look at the scaffolding, it should show you the grid on here somewhere. Maybe not. Yeah, there's grid system. So the live grid system is like this. It's a 12-column system. I should have went into this a little bit further. I apologize, but it goes into more detail here on the scaffolding page on the Bootstrap actual official page. You can see that this would be like span 1, span 1, span 1, span 1, span 1. You can see how they kind of work within each other, but overall it's a 12 grids, or it's a 12 column system, and that's the way these spans work. So that's, does that answer your question?
I believe so. It's an interesting question. I get it a lot, and I'm interested to get your take on it. And it's about using multiple templates in a website. So it's from Alan. Can Bootstrap be used on a website at the same time as another platform? And generally, I always say yes, but interested to get your take on it.
Well, yes, as long as they don't conflict. You know, that's a pretty open thing by saying by another platform, because that can mean a plethora of things. But when you're involving a bunch of different files and platforms and things like that, you're going to run into conflicts at some point unless you really try to slim it down. So part of a front-end developer or website developer, what we like to do is not simplify things, but try to get things on as simple of a system and make it work effectively. So we're not trying to have what I affectionately call a Frankenstein, where you have just like a ton of different things on it, and all of a sudden everything's fighting each other. Because naturally that happens the more stuff you put into a site. Sometimes things just don't get along.
Okay, very good. And since you're still on this grid here, is this a 960 grid?
Well, as you saw when I developed this template, it's responsive. I made it 1,400 pixels, and I started out at 1,000 pixels. So it's when you set the CSS above it as row fluid, this just says row, but you can also, here's the fluid grid system, for example. So this is row fluid. You can make it any width that you want. When you have it just be row, it's actually set by breakpoints. So you can do it. I just prefer row fluid because it seems to make the most sense to me.
All right. And a question from Pam. Bootstrap uses menu suffixes like nav-pills. Is this something you have to write into your files, or will it apply to the designs?
It depends on what your module you're using, if it's the core. If the core has it in there, obviously if it doesn't have the CSS suffix in there, you have to do probably a template override of some sorts, or get something so it incorporates it in there. I saw a great tweet by Chad Widnangle. What's up, Chad? Hopefully you're watching this. About how he created custom modules and applied Bootstrap styling to it, and you can easily create like accordions or things like that. I know Protostar itself uses a well style. I'll actually pull it up here to show you what it looks like. I'm glad you brought that up because it's pretty cool to I think I have something. Maybe it's here. There's an older one I have over here. So it's modules PHP resides within the HTML folder, and we've added an extra style called well. And all it did is, I'm not going to explain this code, but we added this class of well within the content. So we have the well, if you have the page header, it's right here, and then show the content. And by assigning the class of well, you're pulling the Bootstrap class of well, and it'll apply the cool styling that's in the well styling. But you can use cool things and do module overrides or things like that, and use Bootstrap to your advantage. Sometimes it's in the core, sometimes it's not. You just have to dig around.
All right, a question from Marcos 2. Is all the code written as you go, or is there a source for code chunks?
Well, to save time, I kind of pre-wrote this template that I worked on, so you saw me pasting in code. There's no way on earth I could type that fast. I'm actually a pretty bad typer. So that saved me a little bit of time. Now, as far as the code for Bootstrap itself, the good resource is the site itself. You can look at the base CSS, and if you want to see how the tables should be written out for their CSS, it'll actually give you the code right here. So if you want a striped table, you put striped table. If what happens on the hover, they have table hover, and you can see the hover's got this cool functionality. So the code is written. For the stuff that's got to be in your content, it's jump on this Bootstrap site. You can find the actual CSS classes and use it accordingly. That works great for if you've got to use icons, for example. You can see like icon search. It'll pull up the search icon and automatically, and so you can see how you're supposed to write this. So yeah, some stuff is pre-written on this Bootstrap site for you to use.
All right, and a question from Alessio, kind of building on the other tools that you've provided today. Are you aware of any less aware visual editors similar to what programs like CSS Edit with plain CSS, something that would calculate values on the fly from your less files and preview them for you?
You know, not really. I'm the owner or the president of our business, and I kind of have to wear a bunch of hats, and I don't get to dive in, unfortunately, as much on the best editors out there. I know I saw Kyle Ledbetter recently tweet something, and somebody else tweet something about Sublime too, and how it was pretty cool and had some cool things. And I looked into it, and you know, I like it, and I like the way it colors things out and it lays things out. That being said, there's quite possibly a much better editor out there that'll help you fill in things. But as far as for static files, I like Sublime too, and then for your less files, obviously you have to do it within Crunch or some other less compiler. Sorry, that was my phone. Because that's just what you have to work in. So hopefully that helps.
Hey, Crunch is free, right?
Yep, Crunch is free. Well, it was when I downloaded it, so I'm hoping it's still free. But it'll ask you to install Adobe AIR or Adobe Air, and that's free as well. Once you do that, you're good to go.
Hey, and you know, Kyle's posted this a few times. Can we embed Adobe products within codes in the method?
I'm not sure what he means by embed Adobe products.
Yeah, I was talking about Flash. Kyle, if you want to expand on that. Dan has commented that yes, Crunch is free.
Okay, good.
Paul posted a question. So basically, we import the zip file into our Joomla 3 site. Please show us how to import the default Twitter Bootstrap files. I believe you did this, didn't you?
Yeah, I went through this, but I'll go through it again. That's fine. So to install a template, you got it right. You just go to the extension manager, and let me close this out here. I mean, it's just like installing anything else. You go to extension manager, and then you go to install, and you choose it, and you install it. Now, for incorporating the actual Bootstrap files, I went to the home page here on Bootstrap. I know some people might have jumped in late and missed this part. And this big blue button, ignore that because you don't get the less files with that. I click on this GitHub project here, and that's where I find them. And I click this download button, download zip over here. You can also probably go to Google and type in GitHub Bootstrap, and your first result's going to be this. So either way, find your way to this page, click this download zip file. Man, I'm getting text galore. Sorry about that. Let me turn on my ringer. And then once you get this Bootstrap file, you can see in here you have the actual less files that you need to work with. So who is that from, Kyle? Hopefully that helps you, Kyle.
Yeah, I think that was from Paul.
Oh, Paul, sorry.
That's all right. Let's see, there was a good question here about updates from Philip. When Bootstrap gets updates, are there good practices to preserve your updates so they do not get regressed?
That is a great question. I'm glad somebody asked that, and that's a headache that people have. And actually, I was wondering about with the Joomla core. Now, there's two things. Joomla core, you can actually pull Bootstrap from the Joomla core itself. I don't recommend it because it's out of date, because Joomla just does not update as frequently as Bootstrap. And this way, the way I showed you, you can customize Bootstrap to make it work exactly for you. Now, that's a great question when it comes to updates. What I like to do, well, you can do two things. You can look at a change log and see what they actually changed. And really, if you noticed on here, the only two files, actually three files that I worked on were the variables, this Bootstrap one, and these are all custom ones. So these will never change. So the only thing I really changed is this variables file. And I added one line to this mixins file, which I didn't even really need to do, but I just did it to show you how to use a mixin. So if you're worried about updating, if you want to update, I would download the latest package of less files and then run a file compare, like WinMerge, I think is a good one. For Windows, there's probably some for Mac too. And you can compare the files and see what's different between the both of them. And if they added a new chunk of things on the variables for the new files, then yes, you can kind of merge and play with it and make sure it works. That way you have the latest and greatest Bootstrap. Your variables are still in there, and just make sure your Bootstrap list files is still what it needs to be, and you're good to go. But that's what I'd recommend.
All right. Kyle is expanding upon his Adobe question.
Okay.
So we're going to get back to it. I wish to add an Adobe Flash product such as a video. Is it possible to add the video to the website through this method of adding templates? Will this import the video as well, or do I need to download a module to do this? I think
okay. Usually what you want to do is instead of Flash, you do an iframe video. But if you want like a, let's say an Adobe Flash, whatever, that's fine. That's still on the web nowadays. And that's actually done through Joomla. This is just the template. This is all just kind of what's showing here. And to pull up the template file just to show you what I'm talking about, let's go to index.php. You can see all I'm doing is showing where data is being shown. It's just this line of code that says include modules. So I'm just showing a module here, showing a module, and then the meat to the component where the component actually is going to come out, where the articles or whatever component you use is going to be in these two lines of code. So we don't have actual images or videos or anything on the template file. That's all done through Joomla. So when you have your site all set up and you're in Joomla, you can go into your Joomla site here and then open up your article like I did that one time. Click on it, and if you have an awesome editor like JCE, for example, and you download the media button, there's like a little media manager I think you can get for it. I don't know if it's paid or free. You click on it and you can actually just insert it really easily into there. Otherwise, you can just do straight HTML and paste in there. It'll say like iframe, whatever, blah, 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 or object equals if it's going to be a Flash video. But yeah, you put it in the actual module or the actual article, and that's how you'd put it into a site. Hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, I think that answers the question, and Paul kind of added that Joomla separates content from design, and Kyle says thank you very much. So a lot of people saying thank you, and we are just about out of time, Ryan, so I want to say thank you as well.
All right, yeah, I hope I helped everybody, and everybody sees the power of less. And again, I'm going to try to send these files over to Bernie as quick as possible. And well, you're going to send them a link? Is that how it works?
Yeah, actually I already did. I dropped it in the chat there. I'm going to steal the presentation back and show them how to access some of the information you provided today. One moment here. Yeah, so you should all be able to see my screen now at this point. And this is our YouTube channel, so you can access a recording of this webinar a little bit later today at youtube.com/cloudaccess. What you'll need to do is come down to this playlist here, Special Joomla Webinars. We're going to post the webinar here, but I'm also going to post it on this page. And I sent everybody a link to this URL. And we're going to put the recording of the webinar here, and I've just put in a few buttons of some of the tools that Ryan suggests using, and you can come here to get the information. You can also follow us on Facebook if you like. Find us on Facebook and get the information that way. So, Ryan, you did a great job. We had 253 people register. Many people attend, and the active rate was pretty high. People were very attentive, posting questions. A lot of people saying thank you. This is great. Smiley faces. Good show. This has been awesome. Truly, I'll be watching all the new webinars. Great introduction. Great info. Yeah.
That's great. You know, thanks CloudAccess for letting us host this. And obviously, if you guys need any help with this Bootstrap stuff, or you want us to tackle a project for you, we'd be glad to develop any kind of a template for you for the front end, back end, and use Bootstrap accordingly and eliminate your headaches for you. But if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for CloudAccess, and we're happy to help.
All right, yeah, happydogwebproductions.com. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
Awesome. Have a good one.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Good luck developing your Joomla site and your Bootstrap templates. Take care.